Good. Well, we welcome everyone this evening. Exciting time. There's a great speaker today. To introduce Chris Vander Woude, who is one of seven sons. He's number 5. He lives in Assisi with his wife Katie and his daughter Zélie, named after Zélie, the family of Therese of Lisieux. He's talking about his dad. You can see the intro talk on the flyer. So it's very special. So Tom Vander Woude, so Chris' dad, is a very heroic figure in their lives, and enough so that there are signs pointing with the times and Vatican documents pointing to this could be a case for canonization of the first lay American dad. That's really big. There are examples of them in different countries, but right here, man of, he'll talk about heroic virtue, but a man who's just exceptional in ordinary things. He's a farm man, raised his children on a farm, taught them the disciplines of what it means to work, and he was in Navy as a pilot. And so he's a very athletic man, coached as well, and then Chris took over coaching. As both taking over athletic director position and coaching Christendom. His dad coached many of those athletes he picked up from his dad. It was very special. And I share this because Chris obviously wants us to build up a devotion enough so to build like a cult. So people know about him. This is what it's called. The official word is a cult, believe it or not. It's a cult of the saint, a cultus. It's a technical term. And so people would know the name of Tom Vander Woude. To know that both, not just necessarily as one whose cases can be opened, but for one who's an exceptional dad. And the story and the virtues and all of that point to just inspiring good Catholic families to know that we're in it. We're the ones on the ground, and we're the ones fighting the fight. And there are a lot of saints among us. And hopefully the first we can recognize, or we can kind of lead the way amongst Catholic lay faithful dads and husbands, as Tom. So I welcome Chris, and we're very grateful. Chris has taken 2 years off from work so that he can go around promoting the name, showing that we're talking about his dad. We are the first official talk since he officially took a 2-leave, what do you call it? Whatever, sabbatical? 2-year sabbatical. So we're the first to experience this. So I welcome Chris Vander Woude.
Thank you, Father, for that introduction, and it's a great joy to be here. PowerPoint presentations is not my forte, so you can save the criticisms for someone else, but some photos of our family will go throughout the talk. First, thank you for the invitation. Father, it's a great joy to be here and to talk with you tonight about my dad. Just over two months ago, a baby named Thomas was delivered, and right after he was delivered, his father baptized him right away because the parents expected him to die within minutes of birth. And the reason why is because he was diagnosed with trisomy 13. That was December 28th, the Feast of the Holy Innocents. It was a devout Catholic family. Received the tests on Saturday. The next day, they went to Mass as a family. The priest, the celebrant, her name was Father Tom. He preached about St. Thomas the Apostle and St. Thomas Becket. And the church is a mile away from a very special man whose first name is Tom. They couldn't ignore God's signs, so as they went home that day, they decided that they're going to pray to this man, Tom, and they're going to name their unborn son Thomas. Initially, he was diagnosed with trisomy 18, and then in the week subsequent, they realized that it was actually trisomy 13. And in case you're not aware, basically, the lower the numbers, the worse the prognosis. Trisomy 21 is Down syndrome. So trisomy 13, they did not have a lot of hope. So they had prayer cards made. They came up with a prayer and passed them out to everybody. The godmother is a dynamo, shall we say. So I think they handed out something like 2,000 prayer cards. Their school, the kids in the class were saying the prayer throughout school. Thomas was born, it was April 9th, 4 months later. With trisomy 13, there's about a 90% fatality rate in the first year, and most die within minutes of birth, oftentimes just because the body is not fully developed. Usually there's an eye missing, internal organs are not fully developed. Oftentimes there's serious heart issues. So as they went through the test, the test showed 70% certitude. The geneticist who they worked with said it's 100%. The test might just say 70%, but based on what I'm saying, it's 100% chance. Maybe a little more than trisomy 13. So birthday came. He was baptized by his dad, and he was missing an eyeball. That was it. His heart was, I guess in the medical world, it's normal or not normal. They don't say strong or good or above average or 9 out of 10. His heart was normal. His internal organs were fully developed. They had to close him where the belly button was. They had to do a little bit of surgery there. He lived, continued to live, and went home 2 months ago. And is now home with his parents. Before they were discharged from the hospital, they did a couple of genetic tests, and no genetic test showed any trace of trisomy prior to discharge, despite the trisomy diagnosis. Being good Catholics, they prayed to a lot of saints, a lot of people, but one person in particular, Tom Vander Woude, was my dad. They believe very strongly that he had a role to play in their son, in their words, miraculous cure. So it's his story tonight. I kind of want to talk a little bit about and share some of the exciting news of what's going on and just what kind of man he was. First, a little bit about our family. So my mom, Mary Ellen, and dad, we have, as father said, 7 sons. I'm the 5th. We are in Arlington Diocese. We live about an hour outside of D.C. My oldest brother is a priest, and he jokes that he got his acceptance to military flight school in the seminary. And if he had gotten it the other way around, he's not sure what he'd be doing right now. So he's the oldest, and my youngest, Joseph, is 37. He's the youngest, and his claim to fame is he has Down syndrome. And I say claim to fame on purpose because with him and Father Tom, for specific reasons, they are the favorite sons in the family. No, mom and dad are good parents. Never talked about having favorites. But let's face it, when your oldest son can give you Holy Communion and absolve you of your sins, and do things like exchange unction, he moves to the top of the list automatically. And then usually the youngest gets treated a little differently, and is often the favorite. So the case of Joseph. Mom was 43 when she had Joseph in 1987. And although she had an idea of having a child that age, she might have Down syndrome, she didn't necessarily know about it. My brother Joseph plays a very vital role, not only in our development as a family, but specifically in how my dad left this earth. So I want to talk a little bit about him first. My mom had a bunch of cesareans early on. I was told she shouldn't have any more kids. Dad and mom said, let's put our trust in God. A couple of Catholic doctors and priests said, there's nothing wrong with trying. So That's why there's an 8-year gap between me and my older brother. Joseph, so when he was born, I was 7. I didn't really know what Down syndrome was. I remember when he was born at home. Mom wanted to do a home birth, because most doctors didn't want to deal with a 43-year-old mother who had multiple cesareans. And she's a stubborn Catholic Irish woman. So she went with a midwife. Turns out that she called the midwife at 10 p.m. The midwife said, well, I don't know how quickly I can get there, but I'll try. She didn't get there in time. My dad delivered Joseph. But I remember making a comment about, why does he look different, or something like that. I'm sure some of my brothers elbowed me or something. But right away, Mom and Dad welcomed Joseph into the family, and made us all welcome him. And I believe our family will point to the gift that Joseph has been to our family, especially in his young years. Unfortunately, the world we live in now definitely does not see it that way. Usually when I meet people, many will say, oh, I know your brother. And my response is the priest or Joseph. Because generally persons with Down syndrome have a gift of being joyful, genuinely loving people. They assume the best about every situation, and usually are absolutely fearless. But honestly, I think it teaches us something about maybe we're missing something. Joseph still serves Mass. He looks forward to it. And after Mass, when the altar boys process out, usually there's 2 receiving lines. One for the priest, and then there's one for Joseph, because he loves to see people so much. I mentioned he has no fear, and growing up on a farm has led to a lot of, what moments. Joseph is very mechanically inclined, and technology is good at technology, and so we live on a farm, not many neighbors nearby, so we just left the keys in the car. And more than once, Joseph and the car moved down the driveway, and we had to catch him. One of the best story, though, was we had a slight hill, and so Joseph was leaving the property, and Dad was coming back from work. And Joseph pulled up the emergency brake, opened the door, and started sprinting home, screaming Mom's name, knowing that Dad was not very pleased. But in an instant, our family became focused on one person. Whether that was the sons or the parents, we were focused on Joseph. Whether that was helping him learn to crawl, or being extra patient, helping him learn to walk or talk. He generally transformed our family and made us not only love him, but love each other, since we focused on him. This is the direct opposite of what our culture tells us about people with Down syndrome. As we see them systematically murdered, we have countries raising a flag of them being removed. They're going to be inconvenienced, or won't be able to have a meaningful life. I believe an argument can be made that every family who has a child with Down syndrome or special needs really embraces that child is better for it. The parents will have a stronger marriage. The family will be better friends because of the love that follows from them. This leads me to Dad and Joseph. You may ask why all this talk about Joseph. Well, in 2008, my dad died saving Joseph. So just a quick history lesson to get us up to speed on that. In 1981, my family moved to Virginia from Georgia. In 1983, my dad and Mom bought a small farm in Oaksville, where my mom and Joseph still live, and a bunch of my brothers have built houses near there. Dad had grown up on a farm, so he always wanted that for his, including animals and machinery. But we'll talk about that a little later. It actually was more that Dad valued the farm life and wanted his sons and family to grow up learning those skills and virtues. On the farm, there was an old brick farmhouse that we lived in. It was built around 1915. Early on, Mom tolerated it. Now she won't leave it. Her and Joseph still live in this house. Dad always enjoyed having something to work on, to fix. And you all that own homes know that there's always something to work on, especially if your home is 100 years old. So my brothers and I have so many memories of life on the farm. Whether that was stuff real farmers and ranchers would laugh at, like us trying to break horses to ride for the first time, or a bunch of male cattle birthing assistants trying to help a cow give birth for the first time. One specific memory on the farmhouse of Dad is Dad loved, we burned wood. It was a wood boiler with a radiator of water. so we were always chopping firewood. And one of my chores with Dad was to do the chimney sweeping prior to the winter season. And we must not have done a very good job this one year because one night in December, Mom woke me and said, "Chris, grab a hat, get outside." And I just remember kind of a slight smoky smell in the house. I was 9 or 10, right? It doesn't really matter. So we rush outside with Mom. Mom's holding Joseph, and I look up to the house, and there's flames coming out of the chimney. And then all of a sudden, I see this shadow emerge up on the roof. He's got a garden hose, and Dad just douses the flames. That's kind of how we grew up, stuff like that happening regularly. At this point, I want to just mention that Dad was a commercial airline pilot. Shortly after they got married, he joined the Navy. He was an A-7 pilot. He flew off USS America. And he served a tour in Vietnam. And then he went into commercial airlines and was a pilot for the rest of his life. After he retired, he went and worked at Christendom College as an athletic director and a coach. Almost every day he went to work, Joseph went with him. Dad would be working in the office while Joseph shot hoops or goofed off with some of the college kids. One of the best aspects of Dad as a father was that he looked for and enjoyed doing things that he was able to do with his sons. Whether that was working on cars, cutting firewood, playing sports, or baling hay. From 2002 until 2008, Dad and Joseph were inseparable, always together. On September 8, 2008, Mom and Dad and Josie, as his nickname is, because Mom just didn't like Joey, so we were never allowed to call Joseph Joey. It was Josie. They did their normal routine, which was go to Mass as a family, and then usually it was chores, and then Dad and Joseph were kind of off to do whether or not it was watch grandkids play sports, do some work, babysit the grandkids, take trips with Mom. So they returned home from Mass at Holy Trinity where Mom and Dad were very involved. After breakfast, I was outside to do that chore for the day. That chore for the day was to get the above-ground pool ready for the winter. Dad had hired a couple brothers who laid bricklayers to do some work on the farmhouse. Not a joke, their names were Ned and Ted. One of them was not there this day. So Dad and Joseph went outside to start working on the pool. Come to find out in my research, most of our dad and mom's married lives, Dad would install an above-ground pool wherever they moved. Whether or not it was just the heat or wanting the boys to be able to have their friends over. So they went outside to start working on the pool. Mom's inside, and Dad's on a different side of the house. Joseph's over there where the pool is. And so, if you've lived in a property for very long, you know when things aren't right. There's this sixth sense. Right? So obviously, Dad must have sensed that something wasn't right. Didn't hear Joseph, called for him, no answer. So he walks around to the other side of the house. And being an old farmhouse, we have an old septic system where the sewage drains into a big concrete holding tank, probably 6 to 8 feet deep, maybe 3 or 4 feet wide, 8 feet long. It had 2 concrete tops, one of which had decomposed over time and was covered by a piece of sheet metal with some bricks. Dad must have noticed that one of those tops was gone. And as he got close, he saw his son Joseph in the septic tank struggling for his life. Joseph at that time was about 5'2", probably 170, 180 pounds. Dad had a tremendously loud voice when it came time. That helped him with his coaching days. So Dad, seeing his youngest son struggling for his life, told the man helping to tell Mary Ellen to call 911. Then he asked the man for help, and he jumped into the septic tank. Well, one thing to know is that, like I said, Dad knew that farm inside and out. He lived on a farm for over 40 years of his life. He knew the dangers, and he was not one for drama. The idea of calling 911, and it was a very serious situation. So Mom called 911. Dad jumped into the septic tank to try to let Joseph out, with no success. So the bricklayer man starts to help. He's from the top. My dad is in the septic tank trying to get Joseph out. Obviously, at some point, he realized that he wouldn't be able to get Joseph physically out, and so the best he could do would be get Joseph's head near the opening to breathe the fresh air. So his last words on this earth were to the man, he said, "You pull and I'll push." So he tried to get better leverage to lift Joseph up, and was overwhelmed by the gases and sunk into the sewage underneath Joseph. Shortly after, Mom arrived to help, but she couldn't see Dad. He had sunk below. She grabbed a strap from the garage, ran it underneath Joseph's arms, and her and the workman could just hold Joseph in place. They couldn't actually physically pull him out. Mom stayed there with the brick man, holding Joseph, knowing that below the surface was the love of her life, giving his life for her son. The son that our conflicted world says shouldn't even be given life. Dad left this world that day, miraculously continuing to help prop Joseph up for close to 12 minutes until the emergency services could arrive. When they arrived, they pulled Joseph out and began working on him because he had justice in the sewage. After being told that my dad was still down there, they pulled my dad's body out. My mom looked on as she held Joseph in her arms, watching the lifeless body of her husband, her rock, her love of nearly 50 years. Dad delivered Joseph into this world at birth. Now he delivered Joseph again in this world, resulting in Dad's birth into eternal glory. For we believe what Christ says, no greater love hath man than to lay down his life for his friends. As many theologians and priests have commented that Christ descended into the muck of this world and sin to give us a chance for eternal life. This concept has really just sunk in with me, understanding the love that Christ has for me and for every person. It actually is more than the love that my dad had for Joseph. He does the very same thing. Dad's death has so many lessons. One of the biggest natural reactions is, I hope I can do that, or how did he have the strength to do that? And for those answers, I want to share just a little bit about what made Dad and how he was able to do such a sacrificial act at the end of his life. I've already talked a little bit about it, but much of Dad's life has farms as bookends. He was born on a farm, he died on a farm. I don't believe that's a chance. He was raised on a large farm in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. As a boy, his summer job was to weed acres and acres of the farm fields. He would get dropped off at a field miles away, have to weed it, and walk back to the house. He was the second of 4 siblings. The farm at that time did not even have running water. So that motivated Dad, and he joked about how that's why he started playing sports, because they at least got a hot shower in the locker room. Turns out he was a pretty good athlete. He played football and basketball, and it was a benefit that he happened to catch the eye of a certain cheerleader named Mary. Mom and brothers and dads were buds throughout high school. I had a lot of fun, crazy stories. And when you're in South Dakota in the winter, you just come up with stuff. So there's a lot of memories that we've learned from him growing up. But I know the tough lessons that Dad learned on the farm growing up tremendously impacted him, which is why he always wanted a farm to raise his family. We moved to Virginia, where currently my mom and Joseph stay live. In addition to 3 of my brothers, have built houses nearby, a nephew and another relative by marriage, which is something actually Dad and Mom always wanted. That was a big reason why they bought the farm. One of the friends has commented that year that Dad told him that he never wanted to leave, and he wanted to do everything possible to keep him close. The work on farm is tough stuff, not dismissing other forms of work, which are also tough. But the farm work is just kind of different. It's probably maybe it's because it's more of a way of life. Whether or not it's baling hay, wrestling calves, working on tractors. and especially the reinforcement of God's providence and trust when you're a farmer as it relates to the weather. Dad was always leading by example, even when it came to hard work. He would never ask anyone to do something that he wouldn't do himself. It is said that the best way to grow in humility is to be humbled. Dad knew this well. Sometimes it almost seemed as though he was trying to be humbled to fail. But I know it was because he felt very strongly that the risk of failing is not a real reason not to try something. So he was always willing to try to repair something and fix something, knowing that the first time might be hard, but the second time would be much easier. One winter, Dad decided literally that the tractor needed to be rebuilt. He'd never done that before, so he pulled it into the garage, and after a couple of weeks, I went in and helped him, and I could literally walk through the middle of the tractor and separate it. Never done it before. There was a few extra bolts when it was all said and done, but it still ran. And he did this so many times that I really can't count. And yet he was a very humble man, despite being able to fix almost anything. Probably one of the great stories of his humility is at one point he was laid off from his job, was furloughed from the airlines, which happens frequently. And he was probably in his mid-40s, had a couple kids in college, a couple boys in college, a couple in high school, and had trouble getting a job. So he ended up taking a job working on a local farm as a farm hand, taking care of the horses and cutting the grass, despite having a master's in actuarial science. Nothing was below him. Mom and Dad never fell away from the church or the faith. However, right before, as I mentioned, right before I was born, they kind of had their faith reunited, so to speak. And a big part of that was the family rosary that they started saying in the 1970s. And not a day went by did the family not say the rosary. I believe it was Father Peyton that said, a family that prays together stays together. My mom and Dad believe that very firmly, and to be honest, the legacy shows that works. Having 40 grandchildren and 10 great-grandchildren, all who are still practicing faith. There are many stories that the brothers tell about the family rosary time. Some revolve around when Joseph was a toddler, him trying to entertain everyone and make us laugh. And I was holding it in until Mom and Dad would break, and then we reset and continue on. Some of the other stories are a little tougher, such as going halfway through the rosary and then Dad saying, "You guys aren't taking it seriously, so we're going to start over." But many of the stories revolve around the family getting back late after a basketball game or a soccer game, us thinking, "This is too late, we snuck by." We walk in the house, and then Dad says, "Okay, in the family room, time for the rosary." And we'd all mumble and grunt, but we'd follow along. We'd go to the family room. Mom and Dad would drop to their knees, start the rosary. Many of the times we would fall asleep saying it, which was okay for Mom. Mom always said, if you started, the guardian angels would finish it. In addition to the rosary, another part that was a huge aspect of my parents' faith life was in the early 1980s, we became acquainted with a priest called Father Fasano, who started Wednesday night holy hours. He'd say the rosary, he'd give a homily, and so his parish was an hour away from the farm. And so from 1983 until basically 2001, we would go every Wednesday to the holy hours, and then we would go to Sunday Mass. And the reason is the commitment to the faith and the teachings. And my parents always talked about the impact that the holy hour specifically had on them and our family. Another role that Dad took very seriously, even though he never talked about it, was his role as guardian or protector of the family. When it came time to guarding the faith of his family, Dad and Mom took this as their first priority. So only for a couple of years did we finally actually have TV in our house. We had satellite TV, and they're only allowed to watch a couple channels and no commercials. And this is mainly because Dad and Mom understood very deeply how images could impact their sons and did everything in their power to guard imagination from shows and images that could lead their sons down the dark path. So for us growing up, there's a lot of sports and Westerns. Despite being a family of athletes, and my older brother actually held the record for most points scored in a 4-year high school career of basketball in the state of Virginia up until 10 years ago. Despite that, my parents had a very strict no Sunday sports policy. And that was because Sunday was a day of rest, and it was for God. That was the one day that I ever saw my dad take a nap. He did not do any work on Sunday. Sorry, I'm going to offend people, he was a Redskins fan. I know I'm in Ravens country. But that was the day that we rested. And nothing was more important than going to Mass as a family, praying as a family, and resting as a family. And in today's society, I've been an athletic director and coach on played sports. I'm well aware of the world of AAU and club sports and how it has impacted Sunday. And oftentimes these objectively good things, though, can divide the family, whether that is causing the family not to be able to go to Mass together, or just literally causing the family to always be running around. Something as simple as dinner as a family just doesn't happen. And Dad and Mom, I think they knew this even before their time, so to speak. The other thing Dad did was he guarded his relationship with Mom. Dad was an airline pilot for most of his adult life. In that line of work, it's pretty common to go out for drinks with the other pilots and attendants, and Dad never would. Dad would go to Mass if he could, and he was an avid runner. He started running in the military because he had high blood pressure and he didn't want to go on medication. So he ran 8 miles 3 times a week, even up until the week that he passed away. But why is, I think, most likely because Dad knew that something as simple as getting drinks might eventually lead down a road that could cause problems with his wife, whom he treasured above everything. Dad also guarded how he talked and let other people talk to Mom. I never remember Mom and Dad speaking negatively about each other in front of us. I know they had disagreements. Some of them were loud disagreements in the other room. But that never resulted in any of them venting to any of their children about the other spouse. Another way that Dad guarded Mom was how his sons talked to their mother. If there was one thing that would get an immediate negative reaction, I would call it, was if one of the brothers said something disrespectful or rude to Mom. I'm sure part of this was from the military days and being away and Mom being a single parent for a while. But I also believe strongly that Dad knew how a son treats his mother will be how they treat their sisters or wives or daughters. That was always to be with respect. So the worst thing we could hear from Dad was, "What did you just say to your mother?" Which usually was followed by, "Go to your room and wait." I work in education. I have the last 17 years. And the way young people talk to parents, and generally adults nowadays, is quite shocking. And I believe it is just proof of what Dad and Mom knew of something to teach early on and to hold the line on certain things. One last thing about Dad and life before I talk a little bit more about his death is just his charity and service. After Dad died, one of the neighbors, who actually didn't really interact much with Dad, said he would literally give you the shirt off his back if you asked for it. That's the type of man he was. He was always the first person any of us sons would call if we needed anything. He co-signed the loans of 2 friends who moved to the area with their families when they didn't have enough credit. He literally arranged for and installed the gym floor at our high school with a bunch of volunteers to save the school 80% of the cost. When the Catholic Diocese started a parish near our farmhouse, him and Mom became very involved. Mom was a sacristan. Dad first built a bunch of portable altars, and then went on to run the altar boys. Dad helped 2 of my brothers build houses on the farm. He had mothers calling him, asking him to mentor their sons because they were going down a dark path. One of the best stories, I believe, is probably around 1985. One night, probably 9 p.m. or so, it's dark. Big, yellow, old school bus pulls up in the driveway. I think it had a trailer behind it. And Dad, I think Mom knew, I'm pretty sure they talked about it, but they didn't tell us. And Oh yeah, there's a family that's just moved into the area. They're going to stay with us a few days. A family of 12, he didn't say that part, with a golden German Shepherd. So stayed with us in our farmhouse, our 4-bedroom farmhouse with 1.5 baths for multiple days. And why? Because this family had contacted the school and said, we really want to move up there. And they said, well, call Mr. Vander Woude. He'll help you out. And so Mr. Vander Woude said, why don't you guys move up here? You'll live with us for a while until you find a house, and then I'll put aside your loan if you have any problems. This was actually one of the huge blessings that came at my dad's viewing. The number of people that came and told the family about something Dad had done for them. But he never talked about it himself. Actually, the only thing he ever talked about himself was that he didn't like the color brown for some reason. I think he said it made him feel old or something. I don't know what it was. At Dad's viewing, which was a week after he passed away, it lasted over 5 hours. There were many people who said they stood in line for 3 hours. Many people came through the line who had never met my dad. They said they witnessed him. They saw him at Mass. They saw him interact with my mom. They saw him interact with Joseph, and that was enough. Or they heard about how he passed. His funeral was attended by 2,000 people. The church, which seats 1,400, was completely full 45 minutes before Mass started. It was celebrated by 75 priests, the local bishop, and over 60 altarboys, whom he was in charge of. The local bishop, at the end of the ceremony, got up and said a few words because he knew my dad. He closed his thoughts by saying, I will not only pray for Tom, but I will pray to Tom. Hearing that from our bishop gave us a lot of confidence. So I hope this gives you a glimpse of what Dad was like in life. People ask or talk about how Dad was able to die, giving his life for Joseph. We can say that it's because of how he lived his life. He gave his life every day in different ways. He gave his life by sacrificing daily for his family, giving up a career, a lot of money, so that he could be present to his sons and help them coach. He sacrificed his time by being involved in the lives of his sons. He sacrificed his life every day by being willing to help whomever God put in his path. Whether that was his typical contagious smile, or by listening or physically doing something for that person. He sacrificed his life every day by doing simple things like kneeling during the family rosary, no matter what he had done that day. Doing a weekly holy hour from 2 to 3 a.m. when no one would know about it. Taking the family to confession, or fasting periodically, which you would never know unless you witnessed his eating habits. Quite simply, Dad gave his life each and every day, first to God, then to his wife and family, and then to those around him. And when the time came for him to give his life for his son, he did it. It was the right thing to do, and that's what he was called to do. My dad was a man of very few words. In all this process, I don't have a lot of good quotes from him. But there's one thing that he did say. He said, usually it's really obvious what the right thing to do is. We're the ones that make it more complicated when we overanalyze the situation. And that was very evident the day that he saved Joseph. Quite simply, I believe Dad is what we're told from the pulpit a saint is supposed to be. A sinner that never gives up and cooperates with God's grace. He does his daily duty no matter the cost. He did what he was asked to do that day by God, whether it was simple for most of his life or extraordinary the last day, the last act of his life. After Dad died, saving Joseph, some amazing things happened right away. First, Joseph had ingested some of the sewage, so when we got to the hospital, the talk was, when he gets sepsis, how bad is it going to be? Will he survive? It wasn't a question if, it was how bad will it be. So they intubated Joseph, put him into a coma in the ICU, and monitored him. And so, in my opinion, the first miracle is that sepsis barely came on. And within 5 days, Joseph left the hospital, much to the amazement, I will say, of the nurses and doctors as we wheeled him out. In wrapping up, I just want to reiterate some things about Dad. Obviously, his story is powerful and inspirational, especially how he left this world. But the power of Dad's story and why we really are promoting his story is because he's a simple, ordinary man that many people can relate to. And just cooperated with God and did what he was asked to do, whether or not that was being a father, or a husband, a farmer, a mechanic, a coach, or a volunteer. And that's why I think his story speaks to so many people, especially in today's culture, where the family is under such attack and where manhood is questioned. Yes, we all hope and pray we can build like he did. That might not be our goal, but we can imitate a lot of the things that he did and bring it daily for God and for our family. Dad's death was made possible by his life. Dad practiced a self-sacrificing love that we're all called to. St. Paul says, husbands must love their wives as Christ loved the church, giving his life for her. We can all die to self each day in little things that can prepare us for big things. And quite honestly, that's what defines heroic virtue, which defines a lot of the lives of the saints. Somebody who just acts in a virtuous way and it's second nature. It's just part of who they are. They don't need to consider it. Third, to bring the story full circle and to see the providence of God. Now my mom and Joseph live in the farmhouse, and Joseph takes care of my mom. My mom is 81. She has a bad hip. She's a stubborn, faithful, Catholic Irish woman who doesn't want to have hip surgery. And Joseph is a loving 37-year-old son who walks her to the car, carries her purse, helps her with the groceries. You can see the providence of God that Joseph now taking care of mom since Dad is gone. I want to close with one other story before I show a short video. And it's related to the story I started with baby Thomas. When the godmother for baby Thomas showed up to the hospital, she got in the elevator, I think it was the day after he was born, and ran into another young couple. The mom was holding a guitar. Godmother asked, "What's the guitar for?" "Well, we had a baby 3 weeks ago, and he's not doing well, so the nurses said I should play music at the same time." Baby Francis, he was born March 31st. There were complications just before and during birth, which resulted in him being born actually dead, and they resuscitated him, and he was without oxygen for 20 minutes. Also, obviously, significant brain damage. He's having subconscious seizures, so the only way to control was with medication. In the elevator, the godmother tells baby Francis's parents about Tom Henry. Have you heard of the story? And, well, we think he just cured my godson, so maybe he can help you out. Hand him a prayer card. This is Saturday before Palm Sunday. So the family never heard. They said, "Sure, we'll try anything." So they take the prayer card, start praying. That Tuesday, the parents have a meeting with doctors and nurses and say, "Look, we got to pull him off the medication. It's going to cause long-term damage, and we've got to either let him live or die. So you should probably prepare to say goodbye." To the extent that they had their family come out, plan to come to town the following Saturday, which would be Holy Saturday, Easter Saturday. This is on Tuesday. The mom, I talked with the parents a couple of weeks ago, and the mom describes how she went home that Tuesday sitting at her dining room table, just depressed, despair, overwhelmed. And she remembers vividly saying, "Tom Vander saved my son. If you can, I don't want to lose him." Wednesday night, they started weaning him off the medication, obviously preparing for the worst. The parents were standing around the clock in case he didn't make it. Obviously, they wanted to be there. Thursday night, the dad is there Thursday night, Friday morning. Baby Francis opens an eye. And the nurses come in and say, "What's this all about? He's off medication. He's not supposed to be doing this." And he opens the other eye. So they say, "Well, tell your family not to come. You're not saying your wedding day. Easter Sunday comes, and the doctor says, you know what, I think he's ready to breathe on his own. And so they extubate him. Baby Francis breathes on his own. Parents call it their Easter Sunday miracle. And 3 weeks later, he goes home. And they don't know the extent of the brain damage yet, but they describe him as a normal baby. He's learning, he's watching, he's raising his arms, he's doing things. And sometimes you can't say it's one person, but the mom feels very strongly about my dad's intercession, especially in that prayer that she uttered in her desperation. With that, I would like to just share a little bit about the exciting news and why I'm even here talking. Last year, or 4 years ago, a retired military man, convert, who never knew my dad, read his story. He was profoundly impacted and went to his local parish priest who happened to be Father Woude. And he said, why isn't this guy canonized? And Father Woude said, because there's nobody making it happen. And he asked Father Woude, well, who can make it happen? Priests do what priests do, right? They just kind of sit, wait, and enjoy the silence. And he said, okay, Father, I'll do it. Right? So he started a guild, the Tom Henry Guild, 4 years ago, to try to promote Dad's story and hopefully his cause goes to the diocese. Last year, the diocese took 3 very big steps. One, they asked the guild if the diocese could be the petitioner, which is the group that petitions Rome to canonize somebody if the cause opens. Secondly, they signed a contract with the Roman Apostolate, who was the person in Rome who oversees the entire process. And you have to have one of those guys on board. And then thirdly, they announced a vice apostolate at the diocesan level to oversee the process, do the research, and get involved. All this is happening. I gave a talk last year, an unofficial talk. This is the first official talk. I gave an unofficial talk. And I'm impacted especially for 2 reasons. One is a lot of people don't know the story. 2 is it's just such a powerful, inspirational, big news story that I think I want everybody to know about, whether or not Dad gets canonized or not. I believe he's already done it. I can say that. But whether or not he's getting canonized, that's in God's control, right? But having a good news story, having somebody who's a simple, ordinary man that died in such an extraordinary way, I think gives all of us hope. And maybe a model or an example of what we can aim at. And so I've set off to do that, to spread that story and awareness, working with the Guild to do what the diocese needs to hopefully open that cause. We're not sure when. We've got favorable response from the diocese. But as we learn, canonization processes are slow and expensive, especially if you're in a diocese that's never canonized a saint before, because you want to check all your T's and you give us a lot of confidence, I think, as Catholics, that all the saints have been heavily scrutinized. So that's my mission for the next 2 years. I've dedicated just 2 years of my life to try to have all the interviews, track down all the pilots that flew with my dad, get all the stories, and also to spread his story for people, whether or not they're touched and want to pray for and to him, whether or not they want support financially because they want to see a story like this spread. But whatever it is, that's my goal for the next 2 years. So I'm going to go ahead and one last thing that Father mentioned, but I'm going to just put an exclamation point on it. So there is no current Catholic saint who is a lay married father and husband. And so 250 years of the nation, I think that's a tragedy in one sense. And so it is obviously hope, but I also think that it's something that might come to fruition, especially because of 2017, in case you didn't know, Pope Francis added that the offer of one's life is a new path to sainthood. Prior to that, it was heroic virtue or martyrdom. And he added, and the example they use is Maximilian Kolbe, taking the life of another and dying. Obviously, we believe my dad fits a lot of those criteria, but we also believe that there's heroic virtue there too. And so those are what we're working through with the diocese in preparation before it all has to get packaged up and sent around. After the video, I will answer any questions. There are some holy cards in the back. These are holy cards that are approved by the diocese, so they are not praying for Dad's intercession. There are some private ones of those that you can contact the Hills or me, but these are approved by the diocese, basically thanking God for his life. But it still is a big step. Usually the diocese does not approve anything public until somebody has made a service God. So it gives us hope. There's also a business card and pledge form if you want more contact information. So I'm going to finish up by playing this video. Some of you may have already seen it. It was done 11 years ago by Focus on the Family. Very powerful. Focus especially on my dad's heroic and saintly death.
I was called to an emergency room to console a family that had lost its dad. I also anointed the injured son, whom the father had died to save. Priests are often called to the hospitals, but this visit was different. The dad was my father, Thomas Vander Woude, and the son he saved was my youngest brother, Joseph. So I'd called Mom and Dad, and I was driving out to home, and that's when my brother Steve gave me a ring. And, you know, hey, something terrible's tragic. Actually, the word's tragic has happened on the farm. You know, Josie's had an accident, and Dad, you know, we don't, you know, something tragic's happened to Dad.
So Tom and Joseph were taking down the pool. I was sitting on the front porch, and we never walked around the septic tank. Nobody ever went over that way, but that's where Tom and Joseph were taking down the pool that day.
I got a call from my wife. She said, Joseph fell in the septic tank. I think your dad drowned. I said, what?
I ran in the house and called 911 and went back around. I just started screaming to God, where are you? And Joseph looked up at me and he said, Mom. So I knew it was Joseph. He was covered in sewage. Tom was trying to push Joseph out of there, and of course Tom, I don't know if it was the gases or just his exhaustion when he went under. There was nothing I could do because we were holding Joseph, and there was no way I could get down there to get him. There was nothing around that would help him. So we waited, it seemed like for an eternity, for the ambulance to come and the fire trucks. And I don't know if the fireman went down there. I don't know how he got him out, but he pulled him out. And I could tell Tom's legs were just limp. There was no life in his legs, so I knew that God had taken him. And then on the way to the emergency room, the man that was driving the ambulance said, your husband has gone on. And so it happened so quick.
Some might say, if Dad, what a waste, you know? It's like, Josie's Down syndrome, so what can he really do? There are people that would say that, I believe. And it's like, my dad wouldn't say that. He's one of his sons, so he would have done that for any one of us. That's what we know.
You know, it wasn't about Dad, you know, for him. He was going to sacrifice himself and do whatever was necessary for everybody else around him.
There was a time when, you know, Down's kids are delayed in all their development. So, in order for their brain to develop properly, they have to go back and relive certain things that we just go through naturally for a quick period of time. So like normally in your child development, during a stage where you're crawling, that helps your brain develop. So Dad made these really long socks for his arms, and he and Joseph would crawl around. Here's my dad. He's raised all these kids, and he's crawling around outside on the ground. He's crawling around on the floor everywhere with my brother Joseph. So he taught us an incredible example about it doesn't matter what people think, or it's all about just giving of yourself.
He did mirror what Christ did for us on the cross. Christ died for us so that we too will be able to be in heaven someday.
Just a great example of what is how valued human life is, that our Lord would come and take on our human nature to redeem us. We're all worth it, regardless of whatever handicaps or imperfections we have.
His legacy is, in my opinion, selfless love. The way he lived his life in every aspect of it was to serve.
To those of us in the family, it was very difficult to understand in the moment. It's something where we've come to understand Christ's sacrifice even more so because of Dad's sacrifice for Joseph.